topic is using leadership to promote a strengths-based family engagement approaches. Our panelists will be sharing ideas about how to help empower families to become informed advocates for their children's learning and how to help school or program staff embrace a true partnership mindset in their work with families. You'll hear how leadership can be leveraged to help instill this vision of family engagement and build staff's capacity to work with families in positive and strengths-based ways. My name is Heidi Rosenberg, and I'll be the moderator for today's web conference. I'll be pulling questions out of the chat pod to give to our panelists and helping to guide the conversation. I'd now like to introduce you to two of our panelists for today's conference, Trise Moore and Sandra Gutierrez. Both of these women are truly helping to lead the field in promoting strengths-based approaches to family engagement. Trise Moore is the Family and Community Partnership Director for the Federal Way School District in Washington State. In her role, Trise helps administrators, teachers, and other school staff and families across the district learn how to partner with each other to promote student success. Trise's work with families is advocacy-oriented and focuses on helping parents build their capacity for positive, solution-focused communication skills and understand more about what their children are learning so they can identify concrete ways to support that learning at home and in the broader community. Our other panelist, Sandra Gutierrez, is the Executive Director of the Abriendo Puertas Opening Doors program, which is a national initiative of families and schools. Abriendo Puertas is a school readiness program that strengthens the leadership and advocacy skills of Latino parents with children ages 0 to 5. The curriculum is based on popular education and draws on the real-life experiences of participants. We have had the privilege of following Trise and Sandra's work for some time at HFRP, and we have been able to collaborate with them on the development of several articles and issue briefs, including some contributions to the FINE newsletter. You'll see these listed on the resources slide toward the end of the conference. We are thrilled to have Trise and Sandra on today's conference to share more details about their family engagement work. With that, I'm going to ask Trise and Sandra to turn their webcams on so everyone can see them. Hi, Sandra.
Oh.
Hi, Trise.
Hello.
Okay, it looks like we are ready to go. Trise and Sandra, thanks again for taking the time to be on this conference. I'd like to ask each of you to take just a few minutes to tell our participants about your work and the importance of leadership in promoting a strengths-based approach to engaging families. Trise, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Heidi. I can define the work that my team and I and our staff partners have been doing as a specific and intentional way to clearly identify pathways, platforms, and partnerships that are co-created by parents and staff to help both teachers and parents feel more informed, prepared, and involved in ways that can show evidence connected to family engagement and student success.
Great, thanks, Trise. Sandra, can you share a little bit about your work as well?
I'd be glad to. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. I am a big fan of FINE, and I use the resource often. I think it's one of the best resources on family engagement out there. I'm pleased to be on this webinar and to mark how family engagement is growing in importance. More people understand its value. Research bears it out. The program I work on, Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, specifically is a program for parents, Latino parents, with kids 0 to 5, which is a crucial age in their stage in their development. And given the growth of the Latino population, we thought this was a good investment to invest in the parents so that the outcomes for the kids will improve as well. So it's a 2-generation strategy. I think as part of our overview of the program and what we do, you asked us to briefly mention some of the things we learned the hard way by making some mistakes in the course of this work. And I wanted to offer 5 things that I think are key and that are key for a successful strength-based initiative. One is that it be supportive, and that means that you do listen to what parents want. You do ask what they want in terms of communication, in terms of issues, and in terms of services. What kind of supportive services might they need? The second is that it be a sustainable approach, so that this is a program that stays with parents. They can count on it. You know, it's trustworthy. It's going to be there. It's not going away. The third is that it be systemic, that it be available to all parents at all levels and no matter what age of their child, and that there's a will to do that. So sustainability and systemic require a really strong will to do that. Another key point is that all these family engagement strategies should be integrated, and by that I mean that the agency delivering them is prepared to do it. They've been trained to do it. They have professional development opportunities to do it, and they're also compensated to do it. The last thing I think is really important, and we made a lot of mistakes in this regard early on, is that you measure what you're doing. Don't just keep doing what you've been doing, and make sure you set goals in terms of what kind of parent engagement you want, how many folks you want participating, what kind of engagement activities do you want them to be involved in, and measure what you're doing. And if it's not working, change course, go back and listen to what the parents say might work better.
Great. Thanks, Sandra. That was a great overview of the work that you've done and some of the things you've learned from that. Okay, we are ready for the main part of the conference to begin. We're going to use some of the questions that we received ahead of time to kick things off, and then we'll bring in as many questions as we can from the participants who are here with us today. So please don't be shy about using the chat pod to submit some questions. All right, our first question is about roles. What do you think are the most important roles for parents to take on to effectively support their children's learning? Trise, why don't you take the lead on that one? We'll have Sandra, you want to go ahead and take the lead on that one, and we'll wait for Trise's audio to come back?
Sure, gladly. Thank you. I think that's a great question. I think whether we view them as such or not, or whether they view themselves as such or not, parents are leaders of their families and in their communities, so they're powerful players and partners because the decisions that they make every day in their home and in their daily life affect the outcome of their family and of their children. So this role of parents as leaders of their family, as agents of change, as powerful people whose decisions have a lot of consequence, I think is an important one. The other term that we use very freely is advocacy. We find that most parents don't use the word advocacy. They use things like we're going to take action. But this role of parents as advocates to improve things for their family, for their child, for the school that they're in, I think there are two key points that get to, key roles that get to the hearts and minds of what we need in order to improve in education, improve in health, and improve in all areas of our society.
Great, thanks. And I know that Trise's work touches on a lot of that advocacy development too, and I know she's having a little bit of a trouble with the connection, so we're going to wait for her to dial back in, and I will come back to her to give her an opportunity to answer that question as well. But while we're waiting for Trise, I want to go ahead and move on to the second question, and Sandra, I'll just ask if you can take the lead on that one too, which is, what are some ways that we can help parents who have little or no formal education understand how they can become good teachers and advocates for their own children?
That's a great question, and there's a variety of ways, and I think it does part from believing that the parents can, and providing them with things easy to do each and every day at home, regardless of their income, regardless of their immigration status, what language they speak. There are things they can do each and every day that will promote the healthy development and educational success of their children. I think starting with an early age is important so that parents learn how to navigate these systems. One of the things that's important is to set a cradle-to-college culture at home and offer your kids encouragement and have high expectations and to be involved. But I think it's a myth that low-income parents can't contribute greatly to their children's education. It's not just folks with formal education. And another part of that that I think is important is that although folks might not have had a lot of formal education, they have a rich life experiences and have definitely shown what they're willing to do in order for their families to have better opportunities. So honoring that as well. It's important to get all this research, all the stuff we talk about, all the volumes and volumes, oceans and oceans of research that we have about what's best for kids and what's best for families. Get it off the shelves, make it something that you can digest and have accessible, you understand what it means. And beyond that, there's something you can do about it. For example, vocabulary. There's talking is teaching, so talking to your child more every day, singing, pounding, all of those things done over time make a big difference. When the kids are older, there's things similar to that, and again, the encouragement, the engagement, and having your eyes open as to what's happening in the schools and what's happening with your child, and that's regardless of anybody's formal education or current income or the zip code where they reside.
Great, thanks. And Trise, I think we have you back on again as well, I believe.
Yes, I'm back.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to just repeat the question again that Sandra just answered because we'd love to have your perspective on this too. And that question was, what are some ways that we can help parents who have little or no formal education understand how they can become good teachers and advocates for their own children?
I'm sorry, my phone went out, so I didn't get the pleasure of hearing Sandra's response, so I may repeat what she said. For us, we found that letting parents actually be advisors on how we do that has been one of the most successful ways. So we literally have parents who are bilingual and some that are monolingual advise as to how we can help them feel more informed, prepared, and involved. And so what we've done is create opportunities and events that allow parents to introduce themselves to other parents that have had success overcoming similar obstacles. So they have a platform to learn from each other in formal and informal ways. We also provide a venue for teachers and parents to share success stories designed to highlight easy and practical ways that any parent can help their child succeed. Then lastly, we found that it's very helpful when we connect parents face-to-face as opposed to providing them with just booklets or just workshops. So we've had the success, the best success with linking a parent who may have a lot of things in common with another parent. Maybe they themselves are new and unfamiliar to the education system, but they've had a little bit of success by having a conversation with the teacher. So we found that when we link these parents together that have similar experiences, the parents tend to respond in a way that most of us would respond. They feel more comfortable, they feel more supported, and the informal connections and relationships that we help build turn into a follow-up in more leader and specific ways for them to connect on their child's behalf.
Great, thank you. And that reminds me of something that I'd like to follow up on. And Sandra, I'd love your thoughts on this as well, but we can go ahead and start with Trise following on her response. You mentioned the value of connecting parents with one another so that they can build some of these peer support networks, and that can help develop their advocacy skills and comfort with doing this. Can you speak a little bit about some of the specific mechanisms that you have in place for facilitating those connections, whether it's through specific opportunities or events or ways of them to connect with one another and share information? Did you start with just a few parents connecting with one another and then build that out to bigger groups? I think our participants would love to know what are some of those specific ways that you were able to help connect parents with one another and facilitate this process. And then, Sandra, after Trise's response, please go ahead and jump in with your own based on your experience.
Thank you.
So what I've found personally as a leader who is actually in a district but also wants to make sure that the parent voice is valid and a lot louder than mine in my staff capacity. So we initially started with this position being one that would be advised by parents, specifically by parents. So we do have staff partners, but I originally, when this position was created, we established that there would be 10 to 15 parents reflective of the students in our community and in our district that would advise me on how do we start. So 10 years ago, we started with this parent advisory team that after several conversations and meetings and discussions and brainstorms, we decided to create an approach that included 4 things. One was, as I already mentioned, an advisory team of real parents that felt like their input really made a difference. What came out of that was there needed to be a platform for parents to informally, not just board meetings, but informally have a chance to link up with the superintendent and the school board members. So we created this platform called Key Communicators Collective Impact Meeting. So for the past 10 years, 4 times a year, we have had these quarterly meetings where the superintendent is invited and he comes. School board members are invited and many of them come every quarter to sit side by side with the parents of our advisory team and of a variety of other committees and groups. And what we found is when a parent who has not typically been involved in traditional ways gets a chance to come to an informal meeting, have dinner, and meet with the school board members and talk to the superintendent, they feel a lot less intimidated. So what we noticed was over the course of the 10 years that we established this platform for just regular parents and school board members and the superintendent to participate in discussions, out of that, maybe not intentionally, but out of that we got 3 board members. So the fortunate thing is, even though we started with an informal platform that said any and all parents connected to the Family and Community Partnership work, feel free to come and chat with the superintendent and school board, we found that that's turned into an opportunity for parents to feel like they're not much different than people in high leadership positions. Then lastly, the other 3 things we've done is we've asked staff to have what every parent wants to know, non-agenda type meetings at the school. And so what this means is a parent who doesn't want to come to a curriculum night, or a parent who doesn't feel comfortable coming to a math night, gets to come to a meeting where they get to say, you know what, I have a question to ask, and it doesn't fit into a traditional meeting topic. So those What Every Parent Wants to Know meetings have been occurring for several years in the district, and it just allows parents who don't have official and formal questions to be a part of setting the agenda for what the meeting would cover. Then our last 2 things consist of our Partnership 101 booklet and workshop. And then what we've also done is we've had parents to partner with other parents to actually have one-on-one conversations, so that if they don't want to come to a meeting, if they don't want to attend a workshop, and if they don't want to read a booklet, they get to ask any question of a parent just like them about how can I get more informed, prepared, and involved.
Great. Thanks so much. Those are some really great strategies to give our participants some food for thought for their own work. Sandra, do you have anything you want to add to that about what you've done in your work?
Yes, I do, and I think that's a great idea, though, with what my colleague shared about having a parents' night where parents want to know. I think 2 key points, and I think this is like an essential foundational point, is that parents need to know the research about parent engagement. In other words, that if they're engaged in their child's education, their child is much more likely, I forget the statistic right now, but to do well in math, to do well in reading, and to graduate. So they can see the consequences of their involvement and the consequences of not being involved as well. I think it really does create a spirit of wanting to do as much as you can to make your child succeed. It's a really aspirational goal when you have all these plans and you want your child to have a better life, better opportunity than you had. We need to build on that love and on that great aspiration that parents have. I think one thing that will make or break any program, and I'm so impressed by what my colleague said, is a welcoming environment. And that doesn't just mean that, easy parking and that there's some signage, but when you're in a place that really does honor you and make you feel like you belong there. And in the case of a lot of low-income parents and immigrant families whose English might not be their primary language, that's ever more crucial to be able to be well-received, to be honored, and to have folks share with you what's going on, what the facts are, and what you can do about it. Lastly, I think it's really important that all this, we're all concerned about this achievement gap, and it's so persistent, and we've been so desensitized because we're lasted so long. I think it's always important to be clear with parents as to what's at stake, that their engagement is absolutely crucial so that their child does not become one of these statistics that we hear about, and then making it very engaging and supportive of the parent in order to take that role, that they want to reach their goals.
Those are some great points to remember. Thank you so much for addressing those. But one follow-up question that we saw on the chat pod that relates to some of the things you just were talking about, when it comes to things like these parent-to-parent meeting opportunities, or even just the sharing out of information about the district work, Trise, that you mentioned, and some of the other networking opportunities, are these meetings that are held either just in the evenings and on Saturdays, or maybe in addition to daytime events? In other words, are there some scheduling workarounds that you found are sometimes necessary in order to increase the ability of families to participate in this type of thing?
Yes, we found that when we have our key communicator meetings, which include the superintendent and the school board members, we do take on a clear and specific timeline. So every quarter, sometime in October, January, April, and June, we let people know in advance that if they'd like to participate in these meetings, we provide child care and dinner. And of course, since we don't have unlimited funds, we do typically have anywhere between 50 to 90 people, and we find that having them in the same place every quarter has allowed us to know that parents can come at any time, and they can expect that these are going to happen 4 times a year, every year. Now, for our meetings that don't include the superintendent and the school board, We have those on the school level. We have them in apartment cabanas. We have them in locations that are requested by the parents. So we don't always just decide, we're going to have the meeting here, come if you want. We have our parent advisory team help us make a decision, where should this meeting be? So typically we always make sure that we have the same session going on at the school and also in a community location outside of the school turf.
Great, thanks. So the next question, and then I don't know, Sandra, did you want to say anything specifically to that, or? Okay. So the next question we have is, what are some of the biggest leadership challenges with trying to bring, quote unquote, all staff on board with a strength-based model instead of a deficit perspective of parents? And how can schools and programs overcome some of these challenges? So Sandra, do you want to start us off with that one?
Okay, I'm glad that is one of the questions, because that is sort of the crux of the matter. And my colleagues warned me not to do this, but I'm going to do it. You see behind my desk here, there's a sign that reads, you can read it for yourself. So there's two ways to look at it. It could say opportunity is now here, or opportunity is nowhere. I think that's sort of where it starts, when we have to check our assumptions about parents, low-income parents, and what they bring. So this won't work unless it is a strength-based approach. From the parent perspective, as well as the teachers or other administrators, there's often a blame game that has to be avoided. Parents are blamed for not getting involved, not knowing what's happening at the school, not showing up, and parents often blame teachers, oh, she doesn't like my child, things of that nature. So those things are really poisonous and can lead to a lack of participation. So I think we have to, those of us that work with families, given the growing diversity and the growing poverty, unfortunately, where we have now that close to 45% of the kids live in homes with poverty. Again, this is a statistic that we should never be desensitized to. We have to challenge our assumptions about low-income parents and what they can do. So always part from an opportunity is here, not from an opportunity is nowhere perspective. And I think listening to what parents want and need is a great way to go. Creating that kind of political will with a team to do this work and do it well and do it systemically is hard, and you have to be authentic about it. And I think budgets are value statements, so it definitely has to be budgeted for and integrated. And I think there's a lot of growth. I'm very optimistic about people understanding the importance of the strategy. We have the research that says this is an important thing to invest in. It'll help you meet your educational goals, and it'll help families reach their goals as well. So if done right, it's definitely a win-win for all. But if done from a non-strength perspective, it won't be effective, and research bears that out as well.
Great, thank you. Trise, do you want to respond to that from your own perspective?
Yes, I agree with Sandra, and I want to add that the biggest challenge from the experiences that I've had is it's actually that all staff members don't always believe in or understand the direct link between family engagement and improved outcomes for student success. Many of us are familiar with the terms linked to the quadrants labeled willing and able, willing and unable, unwilling and able, and unwilling and unable. If we put our effort into identifying and featuring the successes of the staff partners that are willing and able, others will more likely notice or recognize the student-focused benefits of parent engagement. Besides showcasing the efforts of the staff that are willing and able to effectively engage families, I think we also want to provide the willing and unable staff members with practical support, including opportunities to see and hear the success stories and the specific tools and tips they'll need to get started. When I say specific, I mean if I'm a willing but unable staff member, I really want to know, what do I do? Where do I start? I may not be able to, as a teacher, do home visits, but what else can I do? Positive phone calls at the beginning of the school year. That's a great front-loading tip for enabling parents to find out whether or not that teacher really wants to partner. So if you as a staff member say, you know what, I'd like to find out what's a good way to communicate with you as a parent. Is email better? Is phone connection, notes home? And if you ask the parent that, they'll tell you. And if you follow suit in regards to what the parent asked for, then you're more likely to get that parent to buy in and believe you when you ask them to get involved. Another thing I'd say is we really want to consider scheduling parent-teacher conferences. where the parents are. So let's say you have your parent-teacher conferences between 9 a.m. and 5. Many parents work between 9 a.m. and 5. And so I think if we consider that we want families to be involved, but we also have a traditional approach to when and where we ask them to be involved. And when we show that there are some teachers who are willing to do some of their parent-teacher conferences maybe in the evening or maybe as a team effort with other colleagues at an apartment cabana, when parents see that we're willing to go to them sometimes and be a little bit flexible, we tend to have stories that are more linked to what positive family engagement can look like. Then lastly, I would like to say that once we demonstrate a willingness to be proactive and intentional in engaging families, it's important to spread the word once our teachers demonstrate, or our staff members, or those in the building. When they demonstrate that, we should spread the word about their efforts. We should celebrate their efforts. And even more specifically, we should celebrate and bring attention to the improved student outcomes that come as a direct link to me as a teacher or me as a counselor or me as a principal agreeing to meet a parent halfway in my desire to help them be engaged. Because once a teacher finds out that a parent that they thought was never going to be involved got involved with another teacher and that teacher had success with the student because of the parent's involvement, when we showcase that, then I believe it's more likely that we're going to get the unwilling and unable, or the the unwilling and the able to agree to be a part of the cadre of willing and able.
Those are some great points and some great ideas. Related to that, we've got a question coming in about what are some of the ways that you can build the capacity of educators to do this type of partnership-based work? So piggybacking off of what you both were just talking about in terms of some of those leadership issues with trying to cultivate this type of a mindset among staff, what are some of the specific mechanisms from either training or professional development of other venues that you've put in place or seen successful through your own work to actually do this capacity building among educators? Because as we all know, many educators don't receive a lot of pre-service or even in-service, once they're in the field, training on how to specifically to communicate with families or to partner with them. So one thing that I know our audience members would love to hear is what are some of those ways that you've put in place to provide that type of training and professional development for staff to actually do that partnership-oriented work and adopt that mindset? I know, Trise, you spoke a lot about some of the ways that you found that are good hooks for bringing staff on board. Can you speak a little bit about some of the either training opportunities or professional development offerings that your district puts in place or that you help to facilitate either formally or informally in order to build their capacity to do so?
So one thing that we've done, we've noticed that with all of this informing, preparing, and involving parents and suggesting that they ask more questions and create their own involvement plan and share their ideas, we've had teachers to honestly say, I'm excited about the increase in parents that are asking questions and creating their plan for their students to be successful and to partner and share their ideas, but I don't always feel equipped and prepared and supported in my ability to respond. So with their honesty, we have embarked on a new next step phase of taking our Partnership 101 booklet, which as I mentioned, is a booklet. It's a small little 4-page booklet where we have parents connect one-on-one to talk about what are their aspirations for their children, what are their long-term goals for their children, how do they want to see the school partner with them, how would they like to partner with the school. So now that we've had a process of doing this for several years, we've had our staff to actually say, please help us respond to the parents who want to be partners. So we are aware of the fact that sometimes teachers don't come in with that family engagement expertise. So what we're doing is we're making a companion booklet to our Partnership 101, and we're creating it with the teachers. So instead of saying, here, we're creating a booklet, here's how you engage families, we're working to continue our professional learning community conversations that we've been doing for a while with staff and parents together. We're continuing those conversations with an intentional effort to have a companion booklet, a companion audio, a toolkit that says, we understand that there is a new level of involvement that we've encouraged in our district. So now we want to continue to bring you along and have you participate in this partnership discussion with a more intentional effort to say, what do you want to know? And how can we help you? So we are, informally we did it through the course of our parent leadership work we were doing with doing connections and conversations with teachers that were volunteering. And now we're working to give more teachers an opportunity to volunteer in the conversation about what the specific companion booklet looks like when it's not just for parents, but it's for teachers who want to engage with parents and inform the parent conversation, use the parent conversation in such a way that it links to their classroom environment and their lesson planning as it pertains to what the parent's involvement brought to the story.
Great, thank you so much. And Sandra, how about you? Can you talk a little bit about some of the capacity building work you've done with staff?
Well, I wanted to add something a little different, but it is related. First of all, thanks. That was a great response. I really want to visit your program. It sounds like you've got a really friendly approach, and I can't wait to go there and learn more about it. The kind of outcomes that my colleague referred to require a lot more than just parent engagement in terms from a compliance perspective. And as you can see, this is a really evolved program. What I think is missing is we don't have required professional development on how to work with families in a variety of families. And that definitely should be required. Even if it's not required, there are ways to getting that training. But what I'm concerned about is the power dynamics between also the parent and the school. And so there's a need to build the capacity and confidence and information and support for parents so they can be effective partners, so they know what's at stake and they know the value of their voice and are prepared to use it. So I wanted to make the case about not, of course, professional development for people that work with families, but also that parents, given how busy and the workload and time constraints that they have, it's important to find the right way to build their capacity as well, so that this is an effective partnership that does lead to better outcomes for kids working together. But that not having that parent piece in there to prepare them to do that, I think you won't get as good results as what we all want. So it also builds the parent's confidence, so it affects their day-to-day decisions and what happens at home, which is where I think where a lot of the really powerful work can happen between a parent and a child.
Great, thank you. And, both of you mentioned a couple of times about, one of the ways that you found as hooks to help get staff on board is to talk to them about the positive impact and the positive outcomes on children's learning and achievement when families are involved. And we had a couple of questions and comments come in related to outcomes and impact. And so what I'd love to invite both of you to speak to is what is it that you have found in your own programs and work that you've done to try to track what it is that you've put in place, what families have been doing, what staff have been doing in partnering with families, and what kind of an impact that's had, whether it's through formal evaluation mechanisms or just through informal ways that you found to do within your program, just to get more of a sense of what have you gotten as a result of the work that you've done. And when I say you, I mean broadly, like you as families, what they've done, you as teachers, what they've done. So what are some of those different ways that you have measured and tracked the impact of the work that you've done? Trise, do you want to start off with that one, and then we'll move to Sandra?
Can I have Sandra go first?
Sure. Yeah, Sandra first.
Yeah, no, it's been we've been evaluated since the beginning from the pilot stages of the program. The first evaluation report was with focus groups that we did with hundreds of Latino parents here in LA County, and ever since then we've evaluated the curriculum to see how it works with parents. We wanted to capture the myths and realities and what their concerns were. So we've been evaluated. We have one national evaluation that covers, I think, 4 states that shows that training we provide is effective across a variety of domains in child development, early literacy, social, emotional health, physical health, family goal setting. It was conducted by UC Berkeley. What was interesting there is that it shows the effectiveness of the training from second-generation trainers. In other words, people that we've trained that are now doing it in their own local community. So we're really very proud of that. We're one of the few programs there's a lot of great programs out there everywhere in every state. We've had the luxury of having a random control trial led by Child Turns, and those findings will be available in February 2014. So we really remain committed to looking at what we're doing, is it working, and improving it as we go along. We're doing that now, adding some a stronger math piece and more information about health, so it'll be even more effective. But again, from parents, we've gotten that there's been behavioral changes at home. One of the striking statistics is the use of the library, which went up. People visiting the library with their child weekly went up by like 46%, so that's one of the things that I'm proud of. The evaluation for our program is on our website, so if folks are more interested, I won't take a lot of time with it now, but I do think for anybody doing family engagement, evaluate if what you're doing is working, because we get stuck in agency mindset and don't look around and see what's really happening. So all in favor for evaluating and improving and admitting what we've done wrong. For example, one of the things we did wrong was not appeal enough to fathers to get involved, so we're working on that as well.
Thank you. And Trise, and I know, just as a little prompt, I know that one of the things that we've had the pleasure of working with you on over the years has been some of your work in creating surveys and assessment measures to administer to families who have come through your office and your services to get a sense of where they were when they began and then where they are in terms of their own feelings of efficacy around supporting their children after having received some of the services. So is there anything related to that or something else that you've put in place that you'd like to speak to in terms of some of the different ways, however informal, that you found to get a sense of what the impact is, even if it's just in terms of families' own knowledge changes or practice changes?
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. I actually wanted Sandra to go first because as the director in this district leading the way for that question to be asked, how do we measure the impact? I love hearing from other people because what I'm finding is though we come up with surveys, though we evaluate ourselves based on questions that we create ourselves, ultimately there is always a disconnect between the specific and direct impact on student success and how much credit you can give yourself as a team for that success having to do with just the family involvement piece. So I love what Sandra said, and I think we're getting a little closer to identifying specific ways to measure the success of the work that our team is doing. And I will say we have come up with a survey that we did twice last year, and we looked at the baseline, and then we compared it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and we found that there were improvements. We asked questions that were specifically linked to whether parents felt welcome in the school building, whether they felt like they were respected and honored partners in the academic connection between them and schools. We asked questions that we thought were really, really good, and we found that linking our questions about do you feel informed, prepared, and involved? Do you feel like you can ask questions? Do you feel like you're creating a plan makes a difference? Do you feel as though you're able to share ideas with school staff? Questions along those lines were what we placed on the survey, and we have noticed that parents are responding increasingly well to feeling more informed, prepared, and involved. Another thing that we wanted to pay attention to is even though our surveys may be good or our responses may be increasing, we had last year we had 1,600 responses. This year we had almost 2,000. We're still not satisfied with whether or not we're actually getting responses from the first time involved parents. So parents who wouldn't have been involved otherwise. Parents who we haven't heard from before because they originally didn't feel comfortable or they didn't feel like their voice mattered, and now they do. So we're working on that. Fortunately, in our region, we have what's called a Community Center for Education Results. It's, and their broader name is the Roadmap Project, with the focus on 7 districts that are doing a variety of things to close the achievement gap, having conversations region-wide. And in our partnership as a district with some of the work that this organization is doing, we're able to, or we're working on coming up with a more objective more, I guess we'd say, research-based, effective way to identify whether or not our parents are more informed, prepared, and involved because of our framework for engaging them as partners.
Thank you, and I also want to thank you, too, for being candid about the challenges that you've seen come up through some of those early efforts, that I'm sure many people can relate to. Oftentimes, it's not until we pilot some of these evaluation efforts or impact measurement efforts that we understand more about how we can go about meaningfully measuring the things that we want to measure. So I think that's really helpful for people to hear how you approached it and what some of those challenges were that you just identified around how do we know who it is that's responding and whether we're really getting, representative responses from people who have just come to us for the first time. So thank you for that. One thing that a question that's come up that I think, Sandra, pertains specifically to your work, but I'd also love to invite Trise to answer this as well, is somebody mentioned that advocacy and the concept of advocacy is a very North American concept. How is it that we can introduce this, or how have you introduced this concept to Latino families and help them embrace it in ways that can really impact their children's learning here in the American school system?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Advocacy in Spanish is abogar, which sounds like abogado, which sounds like lawyer. And it is sort of a PC term. What we found that we, again, went back to parents and asked, they like the word tomar acción, to take action instead of the word advocacy. So that's how we keep this very parent-friendly and accessible. One of the things in terms of taking action or advocacy is you have to have the information that you need. The information is the beginning stages of advocacy. So we do in our program inform parents what's happening in the schools, what are the reading levels at the schools, what are the graduation rates at the schools, so that they are clearer as to what's at stake. The popular education methodology that we utilize, its whole point, its whole reason for being is to take action and improve outcomes. So it's sort of woven in throughout the whole curriculum that this is about improving lives and taking positive steps and actions that will help you and your family and community. It also promotes civic engagement as a form of advocacy or taking action. And I think one of the reasons a lot more folks don't get involved in advocacy for example, in education reform efforts or improving certain schools, again, it goes back to that welcoming environment and, again, their sense of self, of what their own power is to improve these systems. So our goal is to improve outcomes, and in order to do that, it is going to take a lot of action with definitely parents at the helm. Without parents at the helm, it won't work. So we have how to advocate, how to take action. There's some proven techniques that are accessible and friendly and engaging. And there's great work by Elaine Zimmerman as well, who has a great program on engagement and advocacy that we hope to partner with soon. But we have to demystify what all this means for parents, that it's for their child first and for other kids as well, improving the systems that serve our families.
Thank you. And Trise, I know that your district is not only populated by Latino families, but also a broad range of other ethnicities as well. And I wondered if you could speak to this, too, in terms of your experience working with families from different cultural backgrounds. Have you found that you or the staff that you work with need to sometimes adjust the way that you do capacity building or helping families understand about the concept of advocacy and their being empowered to support their children's learning in ways that are culturally responsive given that family's background?
Yes. Fortunately, because we happen to have family liaisons, and almost all of them speak Spanish also, so they're bilingual. And we didn't select them just because they speak Spanish, but we were originally piloting an approach that said, let's consider that the language barrier. Well, everyone knows, and it's obvious, the language barrier contributes to whether or not a parent will want to come to the school and talk about ways they can advocate for their child. So of the 8 family liaisons that we've had, we are finding that our Latino families, our Hispanic and Latino families, don't have a problem with coming to the school if there's someone that speaks their language. We're finding that our Latino families are really interested in advocating for their children. And yes, I agree with Sandra, the word advocacy can be kind of complex, and it's not usually something that is maybe promoted in systems, because usually when we hear the word advocate, it means there's one side or the other, or that someone else didn't do something right and the other person is fighting for that. So what we're doing is we're working with a framework that has our family liaisons, whether they, not just because they speak Spanish, but our family liaisons are just like our teachers, only they don't teach the student academic information. They guide parents to engage their students, and they become coaches for the parent to understand that regardless of the language barrier, regardless of the cultural background, and of course we have over 50% non-white families in our district. So we have a high population of multicultural families, and we have typically more of our staff is reflective of our Caucasian population, and we're finding that parents don't feel like they are just ostracized because it's intentional. They're finding out that the system doesn't have a way of understanding how they want to be involved, and so sometimes they feel like they have to advocate because there wasn't a proactive, intentional way for them to partner. So what we do is we have our family liaisons work with families of all cultural backgrounds and explain that you can advocate, or you can partner, or you can do both, and it's up to you. So our framework gives the parent an opportunity to decide whether they want to use the word partner or advocate according to what works best for them. But either way, we ask them to be informed, prepared, and involved, and we ask them to tell us what that might look like in a way that's comfortable and convenient for them.
Heidi, can I just add one thing? I think what you said is just so important, especially that it's comfortable for them. One of the things we found worked, and I was surprised, I didn't think it would work, we have a pledge card or a compact, if you will, where parents sort of pledge that they understand that they're their child's first teacher and that home is their child's first school, and then they pledge certain things that they'll do throughout the year to get involved in their child's education. It's in their own words, they sign it, they put their kid's name, and they take it home. So it serves as a reminder, it's a keepsake of their commitment to these things. And found that's a really friendly way to do it, and this idea came about as a result of a parent's suggestion. So sort of takes it to the next level and sets a goal around doing it. So it's not just left at I know it's important, but here's what I'm going to do, here's what I commit to doing. And I think it's just a good and fair basis from which to part and to check oneself on. It's a very parent-friendly thing. It's a very beautiful card there on a lot of refrigerators of the parents that we work with. So.
Great, thank you. And one question I just saw come up in the chat pod that really relates to this too, so I'm going to go ahead and have Sandra, if you don't mind, leading off on this follow-up. But the question is, how do you encourage families to balance their Latino educational values with those of quote-unquote New England educational values, such as rigorous and classroom work, developing and articulating opinions, collaborating on a team, aspiring to go on to a career or to go to college? And I'm assuming that what's inherent in that question is that how do you encourage families to balance what might be disconnects between maybe how they were raised through an educational system to navigate learning and achievement, and then what their children face being here in the United States?
Right. Wow, that's a really big question. Parents are more alike than different, and I think there's a strong value on education and a real hunger to want to know what they can do so that their child can have what we hear every day, una mejor vida, mejores oportunidades, a better life than I had, more opportunities than I've had. That comes up time and time again. So I don't know if there's that much of a disconnect between what Latino parents want and what other parents want. When we talk about more recently arrived immigrants, and definitely in the case of my own family, a child that is bien educado, well-educated, meant a child that was polite and courteous and didn't ask questions. So in that sense, I could see that there could be some challenges and possibly even a little bit of a clash as to what the perceptions are and what the best practices are in that case. I think our program does deal with that. It deals with other programs as well with the myths and realities about what we know now as opposed to what we knew then. We have to examine how we were raised. Parenting is very personal. It's culturally influenced. It's the hardest in the world to do. It's the most important thing in the world to do. So a lot of our program focuses on examining how we were raised and how we want to raise our kids given what we know now works. Because there are a lot of myths out there from it's good to let the baby cry, to boys shouldn't cry. There's a lot of myths that can be damaging to a child, so try to demystify what these things mean and definitely have the family set up a goal and a family plan to reach that goal. And it's been very easy for them to get there because their goal is about education and about their kids having a better life. So building on that. But those issues do come up time and time again. We try to take the wisdom from previous generations, for example, the dichos, which is the way that generations share wisdom from one to the other. For example, if you don't look forward, you stay behind. Adelante no mira, atrás se queda. Those kinds of things that are part of the culture and of everyone's culture that help frame the sessions and help frame the learning, I think do help to sort of make it friendly so that you can examine your life and how you were raised and choose what works and what you like, and what you know now is a better way to go. It's very transformative in that sense because it is so personal.
Thank you for those insights. That's really great. We're actually almost out of time, and so we're going to go to our final question of the web conference, which I'll have, Trise, I'll have you lead off with this one and then have Sandra jump in after that. So this is actually a combination of a couple of different questions that came in related to a similar thing. And that one person noted that many teachers give parents advice or guidance around family engagement that relate specifically to schoolwork and the things that are being done in the school day, as opposed to some of the ways that parents can support their child's learning at home and outside of school. And so one question related to that is, how can we help educators implement more active programs about things that parents can do at home and outside of school, either as their own standalone family engagement activities outside of the school, or things that can specifically build on and augment what's happening during the school day? So how is it that we can put more programs in place from the educator side to actually help families understand what some of those activities are that they can do with their children, as opposed to just focusing on what's happening during the school day and what the family needs to know about that? So Trise, can you lead off with that one?
Sure. I want to answer that question in two ways. One, with a specific answer as it pertains to the school and the teacher voice. And then secondly, I want to answer by giving an overview of three general roles I think a parent can play. And if the teacher buys in or supports either one of those roles, then they'll be able to answer that question themselves. So the first response I have is specifically in our district, I have encouraged and helped support some of our principals who have created grade level, and now with Common Core, I'm not quite sure how I can explain it, but what some of our principals have done is they've asked their teachers to take a look at what they're covering in the classroom over the course of a month or a quarter, and connect the big picture concepts in a way that they can give the parent some specific or general tips linked to what they'll be covering in the class for that month. So let's say, for example, we're talking about math, and the teacher is going to cover a few general concepts. Then what the teacher would create, or what the principals have helped the teachers create as a team, is a list of things that the parent can do at home, a list of free places the parents can take the child to maybe connect that classroom learning to an experience out in the community. And sometimes what we find is parents are the best teachers of their children at home in ways that are relevant for them. So I would, answer first that get your principals to see if they can get a group of teachers that are interested and able in saying, you know what, I know what I'm covering this month, and I think I'm going to come up with some specific, general, free and easy ways to help my parent know what I'm covering, help my parents know what I'm covering, and link it to things they can do at home. Then lastly, I would explain the three general roles I think teachers should know parents can take on, and I'd say the three roles are social capital builder or recruiter of other healthy adults in your child's life. That's a role the parents can play. A role as partner to make sure that the teacher knows your child's strengths and interests and about your culture in ways that might be relevant for the teacher. And then thirdly, I'd say as decision maker and idea sharer of general information that the teacher may not know. So if I could just really wrap up clearly that, you know, the most important role a parent can take is in my mind, is that of a personal encourager, an academic coach. That includes consistent discussions at home about high expectations and aspirations linked to their child's strengths and interests, discussions about long-term education goals, and the link between success and effort. So if a teacher encourages a parent to be their child's academic coach, even if they never graduated from high school, encouraging your child to focus on working hard, practicing, and identifying their strengths, that's easy for any parent to do. Then another role, as I said, would be that of a social capital builder. We know a lot of kids who have parents that are really, really involved. They have social capital. They have networks. And by that I mean parents can take on a role of finding healthy adults that can be in their child's life and encourage them to succeed. Encourage them to ask these individuals, and it can include staff, counselors at the school, any member of your community. As a parent, your role can be, and a teacher can explain to a parent that your role is to build the social capital and expand on the exposure and experiences your children have outside of the classroom. Then lastly, I'd say that the role that I want to identify for parents to take on is to know that the people in the building directly impact your child's learning. And whether you feel adequate or sufficient as a leader or not, if you don't let your voice represent your child, then the teacher doesn't know how to serve your child from a perspective that is as important as yours. So if a teacher believes in what I just said, a parent as social capital builder, parent as recruiter of healthy people in the lives of the child that can encourage the child, parent as decision maker, if the teacher believes in those things, then the teacher can come up with ways to encourage the parent to talk about and do those things with their child, both in the school and outside of the school setting.
Great. Thank you, Trise. Those are some great ideas. And Sandra, I know that your program focuses on children before they enter into the formal school system, but I wonder if you can speak to that, too, in terms of how staff and teachers within your program can help have that broader concept of family engagement around what families can do at home and in the broader community, not just within that program itself, to enhance their children's growth and development.
Yeah, that's the heart of the program, actually. Home is the first and most influential school, so it's jam-packed with home activities that you can do. I think there's a lot of information that is new to us, and so it's new to parents as well. Things like the summer learning loss, addressing that and having fun-filled activities that are also learning opportunities throughout the summer. There's just a variety of things that are done, but we are focused on what happens in the home, 0 to 5. I do think that it's important to concentrate on that, that our focus is 0 to 5, because we do prepare parents for what happens, how can they navigate the school districts that their kids will eventually go through, and we hopefully have set a foundation for them to ask questions, feel comfortable about it, and to ask for what they can do at home to support their kids if it's not readily given it to them, but that they can ask those questions. So I think that's a really key point, to have the parents ask what they can do.
Great, thank you. And with that, we need to wrap up the Q&A portion of the web conference. And thanks to everyone for submitting such great questions. This has been a really thoughtful discussion about capitalizing on family strength.